We're going to start. Okay, guys, we're starting. Elizabeth, we're going to start. Vince. Okay, let's get started. A couple things to talk about. I said today we were going to talk about fasting, and that is the primary thing we're going to be talking about. But a couple other things as well. We've had a question about the calendar that I want to just give a quick overview of why there are different calendars in the Orthodox Church. The first thing I want to do is point out, I mentioned in the sermon today that we began the Lenten Triodium. Okay, that in the rubrics when we put our services together, we are now in the period of the Triodium. This is the book that's referring to in English. It's called the Lenten Triodium. And when you go into this book, which you are welcome to purchase, I have no idea how much it costs anymore. This was, what, $34? It's a wonderful thing to buy because there are service texts for every day of the week during Great Lent. And a lot of times, we're not able to get to church every day of the week in Great Lent, or the church doesn't have church services every day during Great Lent. When we talk about spiritual reading, this actually is another form of spiritual reading where we actually read the service text. And what does that mean? It means that if you open this, it says Matins. Let's see what this says here. Matins were in the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee. That's where we are today. And so it has Matins, and it gives you all the texts that change for Matins that refer to the publican and the Pharisee and the various spiritual themes that occur relating to the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee. And so it does that for all the different days. Saturday in the first week of Great Lent, you've got Vespers and Matins and all the texts and everything. So the other thing about this book is that in the front of this book, there is an article about fasting by Father George Florovsky. Let me make sure that's right. Because I sometimes get that wrong. No, I'm sorry. The Meaning of the Great Fast by Archimandrite Callistos Ware, who also wrote The Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Way, which many of you have read. This is, I think, the best article on fasting that there is in terms of its comprehensiveness. And so this is another benefit of owning this book is you have that article on fasting, and then there's an article on the meaning of the Great Fast, the meaning of the services of the Great Fast. So that's the Lenten Triodium, very, very important book in our church. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that Metropolitan Callistos says about the fast, but in introduction to that, I want to simply say that fasting is one of the things that is most unique about becoming Orthodox when you're first becoming Orthodox, because you can be a very committed Christian in other jurisdictions and other communions, we might say, where fasting might be something that is a sort of personal option. If you choose to fast in a way that seems right to you, that might be something that you do. A lot of evangelicals would read, for instance, is it Richard Foster's the
Celebration of Discipline.
Yeah, Celebration of the Disciplines, where he talks about fasting and fasting traditions. But those are quite different than the Orthodox fast. The thing that's most notable about the Orthodox fast is it is the one real ascetical tradition, ascetical action that we share in common, that we agree that we are all going to fast together. And the genius of this and the beauty of the fast, it should be exciting to you, the fast. It really is exciting because there is nothing more unnatural than eating the same way every day. And Orthodoxy understands that. I often find that, when I feed my dogs, I always get this pang of conscience. Like, they eat the same food in the morning and the night, day after day after day after day after day. And they're hungry enough, they eat it. But I always wonder, to be a dog and just eat the same dog food for years. What a drag. If you tried to do that, you would be mentally tormented if you tried to eat the exact same food every day without any change. But the other side of that is that there are gradations of food in our life. And there are days that are meant to be feast days. And in order to have a feast day, you've got to prepare for a feast day. And that's why you have a fast day. And so the important thing about the Orthodox fast is its origin is a feast. The fast is not the point in and of itself. The fast is the journey to the feast. The feast is what's primary. The Feast of Feasts, of course, is Pascha, Orthodox Easter. That is the Feast of Feasts. And if you've never gone through an Orthodox Pascha, let me tell you, it is the greatest thing on earth. It is just, there's nothing like it, especially if you've been preparing yourself for several weeks of fasting. It is the most joyous, bright, just thrilling night. It's, we come here, it's 11:30 at night, we start the services, we don't finish till 3 in the morning, we go over there and outside and we eat the feast. Of course, the feast is the Eucharist, which by then many of you will be chrismated into the church. But, and then we partake of foods that we've been fasting from, oftentimes till 4 or 5 in the morning. And it is just wonderful. And it's that we're looking to. It's that feast is what the fast is leading us to. And so there's an understanding that in order to have a proper balance in our life, there are feast days and there are fast days that prepare us for it. Every Sunday is a little Pascha. Every Sunday is the feast of the resurrection of Christ. And you'll notice in books like this, although you won't see this reflected in the Triodium so much, but other Orthodox books, it's clear, the basic texts that we sing for Sunday are all resurrection texts all year long. All year long we are celebrating the resurrection of Christ on Sunday. That means that every week there is a fast to prepare for the resurrection. And that's the Wednesday-Friday fast. The Wednesday and Friday fast are still Eucharistic fasts. In fact, all fasts look to a feast, and the feast is always the Eucharist. Now, technically, since we have liturgy on Thursday, the Wednesday fast prepares us for liturgy on Thursday. The Friday fast prepares us for liturgy on Saturday and Sunday. But it's important to note that even if you're a catechumen, even if you're not going to receive, that doesn't mean you don't fast on Wednesdays and Fridays, okay? Fasting, therefore, looks to the next feast, and that might be different for different people. Some people might be fasting on Wednesday, and they'll break their fast with the Eucharist on Thursday. Other people might be fasting for half a year before they break their fast with the Eucharist. So we don't stop fasting just because we're not receiving. Fasting takes on a rhythm of life in and of itself. And we're going to be talking about the rules of the fast here in a moment. But fasting for us is a joy. It is a gift. It is good for the body to fast, although that's not the primary reason why we fast. We fast because we prepare ourselves to enter into communion with our Lord. We set aside the temporary food that can only give us temporary energy and therefore a fleeting life, because we know we're going to receive the true food, the bread from heaven, which gives us the life of the kingdom, the life that has no end. That's why we always set aside food in preparation for the Eucharist. We should mention, I think I did mention this last week, that the Eucharistic fast proper is from midnight, the night before you're receiving communion. We cease partaking of all fluids and solids. All right, so no water, no food from midnight until we receive the holy mysteries of Christ's body and blood the next day. And it's okay if you want to start doing that just as a sort of preparatory thing, even though you're not yet receiving communion. It can be helpful just to get into that rhythm. What does it feel like to get up on Sunday morning, just get ready, go to church, don't have breakfast, don't have coffee, don't have orange juice, don't have water, all those sorts of things. It goes without saying, or I suppose we should say it in this context, that if you have a health condition, if you have a reason why you cannot fast, maybe you take medication that requires food to go with it on a Sunday morning, that's when you want to just talk to me, and then if your doctor says you have to take this at 7 a.m. every morning with food, then you must do that, even if you're going to receive communion later on. So the fast is not meant to be a legalistic, rigid, I can't do what I want to do sort of thing. It's meant to be a gift for us, a gift for our spiritual preparation. So we do make exceptions, what in the Orthodox Church we call economia. Economia is really, we hear the word economy in that. Economia is, in a sense, a dispensation based on pastoral realities. Okay? Metropolitan Callistos talks in his article about 5 misconceptions about fasting. And so I want to cover those quickly, and then I'll go over the details, some more of the details of the fast, some of which you'll be getting that a lot of Orthodox Christians don't know, because they probably haven't read this article or paid a lot of attention. But the first misconception about fasting, first of all, fasting is not only for monks. Some people think that fasting is, oh, well, that's for people living in these controlled environments where everything is prepared for them and they don't have to think about it and they don't have to work so hard. It's only for the monks. That's not true. Fasting in the Orthodox Church is for all Orthodox Christians. There are no distinctions made in the canons of the fast or in the typicon. The typicon is the order of services and spiritual practices that we follow. There's no distinction made between monks and laity. The things that we do liturgically and in terms of the fast are the same for all Orthodox Christians. And one thing to keep in mind as we go over, I think, some of the rules, what will be different is the severity of the fast. Monks may fast a little bit more severely than we do, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The first thing is fasting is for everybody, and fasting is necessary for our spiritual lives. That's the underlying principle there. It's very difficult from an Orthodox point of view and understanding to conceive having a spiritual life without there being any fasting. There is in particular a very direct connection between fasting and prayer and fasting and liturgy. We feel this around the middle of Great Lent, after your body has had time on the fast to sort of change its biochemistry. When you're standing in church, it starts to feel light. It starts to feel like your attention is much sharper. It's easier to pray. And it becomes easier to pray, which means it also becomes easier to fast. And we experience the link between fasting and liturgy. But there's even, in a sense, there's a parallel link, and that is between fasting and what we call prayer of the heart, or saying the Jesus prayer. Any kind of prayer that takes us into the interior, into the heart. You can feel the connection between praying the Jesus prayer on a full stomach and praying the Jesus prayer on an empty stomach. It's a vast, vast difference. So there's a realism to the fast as well as far as that goes, and that's why it's for everybody, not just for monks. Number 2, fasting is not a form of works righteousness or Pelagianism, for those of you who know your theological terminology. Pelagianism is, in essence, a theological movement that emphasized establishing your own righteousness before God. And that's not, Pelagianism is roundly condemned by the Orthodox Church, and we do not fast in order to prove anything to God. Fasting in itself, and our liturgical texts actually say this right around mid-Lent when we've been fasting for a while. It says, do not think that you have achieved anything with your fast. Fasting is not impressive to God, and God does not need our fast. Fasting is for us. Fasting is something we need to be more aware of the presence of God. And that's really, really important. We're not fasting in order to impress God or prove something to God or establish our righteousness. We are fasting so that we can participate in the righteousness of Christ. Fasting is preparatory to a communion that defines us. That's really, really important. So we don't fast, we don't really do anything to try to establish meritorious works. Again, another theological terminology from the West. That's just not part of our worldview. The struggle that we engage in is the struggle with our own sin, the struggle with our own forgetfulness of God. We seek to remember Him continually. And fasting is a very, very powerful way of doing that. Once you get into the rhythm of fasting, even when we're only fasting Wednesdays and Fridays, it changes the rhythm of the week. You get up on Wednesday, oh, it's a fast. And immediately you know it's a fast, you're also thinking then of the Lord, the church, the Jesus prayer. I better say my prayers more, not I need to go to the grocery store and get some lentil soup. but it should lead us into this ecclesial rhythm of the week. Instead of just going through the whole week and just, oh yeah, I forgot about all that. You wake up Thursday morning, oh, it's not the fast. Oh, I'm going to have eggs and bacon today. That's fine. There's no foods that are off the table when it's not a fast. But it changes that sense of preparing to enter into the communion of God. Third, fasting should not be self-willed, but obedient. And this is really, really important. There are like I said, fasting is the one real ascetical act that we share in common with the same rules. We only make exceptions in those rules for pastoral reasons like illness or pregnancy, or in some cases a life situation. But we all fast the same way, and we all fast together. And this is really important. We don't say, oh, well, I kind of like this part of the fast, but I'm also kind of experimenting, and I want to try this over here too, and I'm going to mix and match my foods, and I'm going to mix and match what I'm trying to do. That would really eliminate the benefits of the fast for us. Fasting is done in obedience, and all Orthodox Christians fast in the same manner. And the beauty of that is that it doesn't depend on our own will. It doesn't depend on our own judgment. It doesn't depend on our stubbornness to do what we want. We all fast in common. There's a set pattern. And what we are doing is conforming ourselves freely to a set pattern so that we might walk the path of the saints. Okay, that's really, really important. So someone might say, let's take as an example what the Orthodox fast is not. What it is not is the practice in more the Western tradition of what are you giving up for Lent? Have anyone heard that before? What are you giving up for Lent? Some people it's potato chips. Some people it's soda. Some people it's candy and chocolate. Each person chooses the thing that they're going to accept as a discipline for themselves to give up. Now, I'm not saying that that's not without benefit. That's still a sort of ascetical act. You're kind of identifying your particular indulgence or weakness towards an indulgence. But notice how individualistic that is. Notice that each person chooses their own thing, and perhaps not in full knowledge of themselves doesn't choose other things. That's not what we're doing. We're not choosing our own things to give up during Great Lent. We're simply giving up animal products, dairy, wine and oil, fish, etc. We'll go over that in a moment. But it's done in common. And again, where we feel this is especially in Great Lent. Great Lent to me is the most strict of the fasting seasons and the easiest. The easiest fasting season. And the reason is because so many people around the world are fasting together. It is a communal event, and we are all doing it together. The hardest fasting season by far, I think, is Nativity fast. Because nobody's fasting around the world at the Nativity fast. This is 40 days before Christmas. This is not a time when most people, culturally we are having parties all the time. And in our culture in particular, our culture celebrates Christmas before Christmas. The whole thing happens before Christmas Day actually falls. Christmas Day falls, that party is over, right? Take the decorations down, it is time to move on from Christmas. Orthodox perspective is totally different. We're fasting for 40 days before Christmas. We don't begin celebrating Christmas until the day of the feast with the Eucharist, and then we continue to celebrate Christmas all the way through Theophany. It's a totally different rhythm. That is a very difficult one because it runs straight into the anti-rhythm of our particular society and the way that we look at Christmas. But the easiest one is Great Lent. It's because of obedience. 4, fasting is not a time of gloom, but of joyfulness. And that joyfulness is the pronounced effort that we're making to unite ourselves to Christ. For those who were able to be at the baptism last night, that's one of the things that we do when we make someone a catechumen. We do exorcisms, we renounce the devil 3 times, and then we unite ourselves to Christ 3 times. And that pattern is the same for us. Every Great Lent we go into, we are renewing our baptismal purity. We are uniting ourselves to Christ. And that is a joyful thing. And fasting is a way that we do that. Okay? So fasting should not be looked at as a negative time of deprivation. Fasting should be looked at more as a time of, think of an athlete who's getting ready for a big game. They don't, 20 minutes before the game, they don't sit down and eat a huge meal and get all stuffed, because they're going to be running around the field. They change the way they eat in order to do what they want to do on the field, right? They set aside the pleasures of food and the indulgences of food so that physically they can do what they need to do as athletes. Well, that's what we're doing spiritually on a longer setting. We are preparing ourselves to climb the spiritual heights, to function as spiritual athletes, as newly sealed warriors of Christ. And that is a joyful thing. That is a joyful thing. It really allows us, and believe me, your body will get to know it as well. Our bodies, if we're always eating meat and we're always eating dairy, and if you've not experienced this before, you will. Your body just feels a lot better when you just give it periods of time when it's not doing that. You start to realize that the stuff we put into ourselves, it obviously affects us physically, and we become a little bit more sensitive to that when we fast. But it very much affects us spiritually. And the joy is when we begin to realize when we fast, the spirit soars. And that's the source of joy in the fast. And all the pleasures of food are, certainly worth setting aside in order to have that joy. 5th and finally, fasting is not a rejection of the goodness of God's creation. Fasting is not a way of picking and choosing winners on what's good food and what's bad food, and what's a good way to eat and what's a bad way to eat. We affirm the goodness of God's creation. God created all things, and he said it is very good. And on a non-fast day, we partake of all things with thanksgiving and joy. But on a fast day, we set aside those things which help us spiritually to enter into true life and not the temporary life that food gives us. But it's not a rejection of God's creation. Our creation is good. Our bodies are good. They're fallen. All of it's fallen. Our bodies are fallen, and we've got issues that we've got to deal with there. Creation is fallen. We've got issues that we've got to deal with there. We'll be talking about those things theologically in very short order. Fasting is a way of reorienting the material world to the worship of God. It's a setting of priorities. It's a putting in place of otherwise the sort of raging passions which determine what we do. So when we talk about and think of all the commercials of, if you have a craving and you've got to obey your craving, you've got to indulge your craving. And what we're saying is, no, we don't. We don't have to obey our thirst. We don't have to obey a craving for something. We can say, you know what, that craving is not in charge of me. Christ is in charge of me. Christ is the Lord of my life, not the passions of the flesh. So we accept the goodness of creation, but we reorient it through fasting, amongst other things as well, to make sure that all things point to the glory of God in Jesus Christ. All things are fulfilled in the glory of God in Jesus Christ. Any questions so far? Those are the 5 misconceptions. Yes?
2 questions. Refer to Lent as the Great Lent. Is there a Lesser Lent?
No. We call it Great Lent because, that's a good question. Great Lent refers to the period before Pascha, the several weeks before Pascha. Other days that are fasting days we will call Lenten. So we could call Lenten. So instead of Lent, we call it Lenten. So Wednesday, we're eating Lenten foods. Okay. During the Nativity fast, that's a kind of Lent. But, and it escaped, the word Lent, does anyone know what that means? It escapes me right now. I think it does mean spring. Yeah, I think it does mean spring. I just don't remember. Yeah, but there's no particular period that's actually called Lesser Lent. It's just Great Lent because of Pascha is the great feast. Therefore, the period of fasting is also great.
And then the second question is with regard to Wednesday and Friday. What are the time parameters?
Yeah. So that's a great question. It's usually when you wake up and when you go to bed. So, in other words, what we have mentioned before is that the Orthodox liturgical day begins at sundown, not sun up. But interestingly, we don't fast by that rule. And I think there's a very pragmatic reason why we do that. What I mean is that on, let's say it's Thursday. Thursday's not a fast day. Basically, you can eat whatever you want on a Thursday all the way until you go to bed. As far as I'm concerned, is even if you're up at 2 in the morning, you haven't gone to rest for the sleep, 2 in the morning on Friday, you haven't really gone to rest to sleep that yet. So, if you want to have, a chicken leg at 2 in the morning, for whatever, when you start to fast is when you arise. When you arise the next day. And you don't break the fast until then, Saturday morning. I think pragmatically speaking, what a lot of us would do, I can tell you this is what I would do. I would just be so tempted to do it that I would fail at doing anything else. Is I would say if fasting began at sundown, what I would do is I'd have a big non-fasting meal at right before sundown, and then I'd start fasting, and then I'd have a big non-fasting meal right after sundown on a fast day. Okay? In other words, I would have cut it short. And what you'll find is that fasting is a struggle. It's not easy. It's somewhat easy when you're just starting because you're really excited about it and it's just a new thing in your life. But as you try to fast over years and years and years, you start wrestling with other things. So I can tell you right now, I'd be guilty of that one all the time. Is playing with sundown, eating before and then eating after, and really cheating the fast. And therefore cheating myself. I wouldn't be achieving anything, but cheating myself of the benefits of the fast.
So the entire day?
Right, so the entire day, from when you wake up until when you wake up the next day. Right, so it's really a 24-hour period from rising to rising. So Wednesday you fast, and you don't break that fast until Thursday morning. But we'll talk about what we eat on the fast day.
I've been practicing lentils and rice on the fast day.
Good. Sebastian.
So it's not really a legalistic thing, but
right.
We would also abstain from foods that said, this actually does not have any dairy, but it's still creamery, or this is actually not real fish, it's just plants, but take that as food fast too, right?
No, actually. So here, let me put it this way. The Orthodox fast is, it gives these general categories, but it doesn't, and those general categories could be understood in terms of both the letter and the spirit. And you're asking a question about the spirit. What about all the fake meats? What about the Impossible Whopper? Can you stop at, can you stop at Burger King and eat an Impossible Whopper? And as far as the Orthodox fast is concerned, you absolutely can do that. You absolutely can. Because the Impossible Whopper is made with plant-based proteins. Yeah. Now, some Orthodox Christians feel that, fake butter, there's a lot of fake butters out there. Fake milks, whether it's oat milk or soy milk or almond milk, all those things. Fake meats, you've got Impossible, you've got Beyond. Beyond is in a lot of the grocery stores. I'm not sure why Impossible isn't. Maybe it's at Whole Foods. But I know even Harris Teeter has Beyond Italian sausage. And if you make that with pasta and just a red sauce, and you saute that, you really, to me, it tastes just like the real thing. Now, some Orthodox Christians are going to say that all violates the spirit, that we should be eating super simple and we shouldn't be eating those things. Well, if they live in a life situation where that works for them, then great. If they want to just eat dry eating, we'll talk about what that means in a moment, and not eat all those things and find all those shortcuts, that's fine. They can certainly do that. But the Orthodox fast itself does not restrict those things at all. That's really important, okay? So getting back to what are you giving up for Great Lent, if you want to live on potato chips and Coca-Cola all the way through Great Lent, you are free to do so because there are no animal products necessarily in those, right? And it's not an issue of junk food. It's not an issue of processed foods, for that matter. It's an issue of animal products. We are fasting from animal products, dairy products, fish, wine, and oil. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment. So all those other foods are fair game. This is especially important if you've got young children or if you've got family members that aren't Orthodox and you're trying to cook in ways that keeps everybody happy. This is where some of that flexibility comes in. And this is why it's so important to understand the flexibility of the fast. These are the goals. These are the things we do that we aim for. But if we need to have, impossible or beyond Italian sausage for dinner, we have not broken the fast if we do that. Same thing with like oils. This gets a little technical, but we fast from olive oil. And another question people have is, well, does that include all oils? Or could we use other oils than olive oil? And the answer is to both those questions is yes. Okay? So what it actually means, so first of all, olive oil has a specific connotation spiritually in the spiritual life. We talked about that a little bit last week. And it's very much an expression of the abundance of the kingdom. And if you eat in Mediterranean cooking, in Middle Eastern cooking, when they make foods, when they're cooking, they don't like put 2 tablespoons of olive oil. They put half a cup of olive oil. It is really, really crazy if you've never cooked that way, how much olive oil they actually use in that region. It's a very luxuriant fat. It's olive oil that we're fasting from. It's not all oils. However, a day that's a non-oil day is technically a day called xerophagy. Xerophagy means dry eating. It means that we don't cook our food that day, and therefore we're eating plain vegetables, plain fruits, plain nuts and seeds, breads, and that sort of thing. That's technically what it means. Now, this is one of those areas where, for the most part, most Orthodox Christians living in the world do not attempt to keep xerophagy every non-oil day of the calendar year, okay? Because that would be really hard for us. That would be really hard for us. That's what they do in the monasteries. But even there, some of the monasteries are cooking on technical xerophagy days. They can be cooking with avocado oil. They can be cooking with other types of oils as well. Coconut oil is fine. So what we actually restrict is the olive oil. And again, it gets into the xerophagy. But let me talk about some of the rules real quickly, and then we can do a few more questions, and then I know we'll have to end. I do want to quickly get to the question of the calendar. Let me just see what time it is. Okay. So first of all, this coming week is a fast-free week, so there's no fasting this week, and that is simply a recognition of the effort that we're about to undergo. We have a week. Interestingly, it's not this coming week, but the following week is often what we would call Carnival Week, the last week where we aren't fasting in a significant way every day. Though in Orthodox practice, the most we might do is we don't have carnival like Mardi Gras in the Orthodox Church, okay? And in fact, obviously,
They're like, oh, it's Mardi Gras?
right. Yeah, notice that the Western Easter is 4 weeks different than our Easter this year. So their carnival was this past week. And Fat Tuesday and all that. We really don't do that. In fact, in the West, many Westerners no longer even understand. I know when I was a rector of an Episcopal church, we did something like this before Lent where we had Shrove Tuesday, we had pancakes. But no one knew why we had pancakes. It's usually pancakes and sausage. Why would you have pancakes and sausage? Because pancakes use milk and butter. And eggs. And so everyone traditionally would bring all the remaining milk and butter and eggs and cheese that they had, and all the meats that they had. And they'd grind up the meat and make sausage, eat all that up because this is the last chance. And they'd use up all the other ingredients in pancakes. And that was the meaning of Shrove Tuesday, of eating that stuff. And there's a kind of an indulgent attitude about it. We really recommend you don't overindulge because food is never something to be treated in terms of gluttonous feasting. That's not good for us spiritually or physically. Even at Pascha, we encourage people, don't overdo it. Your body hasn't eaten these foods for weeks. You need to be kind to yourself a little bit. But so this is a fast-free week, and it's just a way of taking some pressure off. Oh, Wednesday, I don't have to worry about what I'm going to eat today.
Obviously, the grocery shopping is mandatory this week, right?
Well, sure. I mean, no, you can grocery shop anytime, and
Yeah, I meant like, because when we turn the page to the great end,
yeah.
doesn't it say what we're supposed to give up on the day? Like it says meat fast, that means we don't eat meat?
Right, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Just give me a moment. So this is fast 3. Then the next week is a regular fast week, fasting on Wednesday and Friday, but not on the other days. Then that next week is what Elizabeth is talking about. It begins the meat fast. And so the week before Great Lent, we give up meat, but we eat dairy products, eggs, fish, wine, and oil on every day, including Wednesday and Friday. So it's another day of sort of limited fasting. We've given up animal products. We're kind of building our way up to it, all right? But we still can have all these other things. And then on a Sunday, called the Sunday of the Last Judgment, or Forgiveness Sunday, we have a service called Forgiveness Vespers, in which we gather here. Usually we do it after coffee hour, and we ask each other forgiveness. Everyone asks everybody else to forgive them in any way that they might have offended, and we bow to each other. And that begins Great Lent. And from that point on, we begin the Great Fast. So we've had these weeks of mitigated fasting leading up to that. Once we get to the Great Fast, then we really begin. Now, before I talk about the Great Fast, realize that the general fasting rules are no meat or animal products of any kind. That would include whey protein. Whey is made from milk products. So milk is an animal product, it's a dairy product. So if you drink energy drinks or protein drinks, you want to switch to a vegan protein drink, plant-based. All animal products, eggs, dairy, fish, wine, and oil. Many Orthodox Christians will eat fish on a fast day. It's not considered to be a major breaking of the fast. My general rule for that is one of the joys of Great Lent is there's only 2 fish days the entire time of Great Lent. It's Palm Sunday and Annunciation, March 25th and whatever date Palm Sunday is. Those are fish days. And if you've really given up fish, then you can feast on those days in a limited way by having fish. If you just eat fish all the time, it kind of ruins the joy of the fish days that we get. In other fasting periods, like in the Nativity fast, before Christmas, there's a lot of fish days, and if you actually ate fish on every fish day, that's enough fish. You probably don't want to eat more than that. And then oil, as we just mentioned, olive oil, and then wine, meaning alcohol. Some might put a sort of addendum there that would say that beer was actually created by monks as a Lenten drink when they gave up the wine and alcohol, because beer has a lesser alcohol content. So I've even seen this in some Orthodox things where you would continue to drink beer during the fast because it's a soft drink in a sense, from a certain manner of speaking. It's still probably hard in our culture.
Depending what state you live in.
Yeah, true. So that's the basics, and as we've said, if you find substitutes, if you like oat milk or soy milk or whatever, fake meat, fake cheese, there's fake everything nowadays, you know? The vegan movement and the sort of plant-based diet has taken off so much that it's much easier to fast now than it has ever been in terms of just avoiding those animal things. But if you really think of what the fast means, you're giving up animal products, so what are you eating? You're eating a plant-based diet. You're eating fruit and vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, breads. And that's your diet for beans. We should mention beans as a source of protein. That's the diet. Now, Lent, however, is more strict. And here's some of the rules real quickly that I'm going to give you, although I'm going to tell you up front that very few people would actually do it this strictly. Technically, in the first 5 days of Great Lent, thus the first 5 days after Forgiveness Vespers, there's technically only 2 meals that you eat in 5 days, according to the calendar of the fast. What's that? Huh? It would be the first week of Lent.
Oh, the first week of Lent?
Yeah.
You don't know what that is?
I'd have
I
to
want to
look
make
it
sure
up.
I circle it.
I don't want you to serve. Actually, Elizabeth, I don't want you to do this. I'm giving you the information, but I'm telling you don't try to do this. So I don't want you to worry about when this actually will be, okay? In other words, Monday and Tuesday you would eat and drink nothing. Wednesday we would have a service called Pre-Sanctified Liturgy, after which you would have a meal. Then you would continue the complete fast through Thursday. Friday we'd have a liturgy again and you'd eat, and then that was it. That's how they do it in the monasteries. I do know a few people that try to do that. Probably not the no liquid. That could even be dangerous. You really have to be conditioned to be able to do that. That is not a place where you start. Most Orthodox Christians are going to eat regularly, depending on their work schedule, their school schedule, do you have children, etc. They're still going to be eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're just going to be avoiding those other foods. That's really what the fast comes down to. But if you can, it's good to say, okay, that first week of fasting is supposed to be more strict than the other weeks. And if you keep that first week more strictly, it makes the other weeks a lot easier. In fact, one priest that I know that really does keep a complete fast for at least the first 3 days, I think he actually does 5, says, the rest of the fast is a cinch after you've done those days. But I do not do that. And I do not think that any of you should do that, because you're just starting this journey. And if you get to a point later on where you're like, I want to go for it, great. But a lot of times people read this kind of stuff, they think, oh, I have to do that, that's the rules. And then they do something that's really not appropriate to their spiritual level. If you fast like that, you really need to be in divine services all day long. In the monasteries, you would be. The monasteries you're not eating, that's because you're in church the entire time, okay? We're still out there at school, working, driving around, managing the stress of a modern secular life. Fasting at that level is incompatible with our spiritual level, so we don't do it that way. But it's okay to know that that's technically how it works. There are other rules, but again, I think the main thing is if you find you read something that talks about eating 1 meal a day or not eating until after sundown, etc., realize that just most Orthodox Christians don't do that because they can't do it. It's just too hard for the modern lifestyle. We are, this is generally true. We are spiritually weak compared to previous generations. We have so overindulged ourselves with the ease of which we eat and drink, and we sit as we travel, and then we sit where we go to, and we're always sitting and we're always eating, and that's why we have a lot of the problems that we do. We're very indulgent to ourselves physically, and we're very negligent to ourselves spiritually. And so previous generations of Orthodox Christians had a much higher level that they were starting at than we do. And that should be part of our sadness. That should be part of our repentance, is to understand that. But a couple of things. Saturday and Sundays, notice, are wine and oil days. Now that whole xerophagy thing that I mentioned, again, if you kept fasting really strictly, then a no oil day is a xerophagy day. It means no cooking, is really what it means. But you're probably going to cook, so don't worry about that. But certainly on Saturday and Sunday, you can use olive oil. You can have wine if that's something that you Please do not feel that if the calendar says wine, you're required to drink wine. You're not. It just means that you may. Okay. And again, wine really just refers to alcohol. Let me see if there's anything else here. One thing that Metropolitan Callistos emphasizes is that the canonical fast restricts food types and number of meals. The food types is the thing common to all Orthodox Christians. The number of meals, there's a little bit of give there. Monasteries, they're doing that. In our life, maybe we're doing 2 meals a day during the Great Fast. Maybe we need 3. That's okay. But what it doesn't do is restrict the amount that you eat at any given meal. All right, so that's meant there is an individual component to that. And again, it's based on your life circumstances. And that means that while in general spiritual wisdom is we should never eat to satiety, meaning don't eat until you're full. You should not feel your stomach bulging at the end of a meal, right? That means that you've stuffed yourself, and it's not, you can't pray when you stuff yourself. So generally speaking, we should never eat to satiety. That includes on a feast day, by the way. But, you know, if you're only eating 1 meal a day because it's a fast, you can eat 2,000 calories at that meal if you can get it down, all right? There's no rules about how much you eat in any given meal. That's probably enough information about that. As you go, follow your calendars. You'll notice that they're shaded. The fast days are shaded. There is Lazarus Saturday in the Russian tradition is also a caviar day. Caviar, wine, and oil. And I will say I definitely participate in that one. I enjoy getting some good caviar on Lazarus Saturday with some Bloody Marys. Very nice. And we do that, by the way, we do that right here. We have liturgy for Lazarus Saturday, and then we have a meal afterwards that includes caviar and imbibements. Any questions, and then I'll quickly mention the calendar. Yes?
Can you speak to how we're supposed to approach the fast in the company of non-Orthodox?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question and an important one. So if we're at work and we go out to lunch with people, or even if we're just going out to dinner with friends and they're not Orthodox, number 1 rule is do not call attention to the fact that you're fasting. We really don't want people to be saying to non-Orthodox who have no interest in Orthodoxy whatsoever, oh, I have to get this from this menu because I'm fasting, right? We really, when we call attention to our fasting, we begin to lose the spiritual benefits and value of fasting. Again, there's probably not a restaurant in all of Charleston that you could go to that wouldn't have vegan options on the menu. And you just order the vegan menu option. And if someone asks, why are you getting that? Just say, I don't know, I just look good today. You know? Just deflect it. Don't call attention to the fast. To people that really aren't interested in it. And for him it would be really inappropriate to be getting into, oh, well, we're Orthodox Christians. We fast half the days of the year. And this is a particular fasting day, fasting week, or whatever. Don't do that. The exception to that is if you have non-Orthodox immediate family members whom you are around all the time, then it would be impossible to fast unless you actually had a conversation with those folks and said, hey, you know, I know you think I'm weird for doing what I'm doing. I'm always in church, and but yeah, we fast, and we're not going to make them fast, you know, and this can be a challenge if you're the cook and you're trying to fast, but you're making non-fasting foods for your family members. That can be one of the most challenging dimensions of the fast. But you do have to have that conversation with family members. Or, you know, a close friend that you always go to the same restaurant and get burgers, and suddenly you're getting the black bean burger, and he thinks, okay, something's wrong here. You know, you obviously have to say to someone that's close to you, that's why you're doing that. But just order the vegan option. And again, you can go out to restaurants and find vegan options pretty much anywhere. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this when you were talking about fish, but I'm confused about the shellfish.
Oh, good, thank you. Yes. So, shellfish are generally understood to be on the menu on any oil day.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of variability here, okay? So, shellfish is another one of those things. You do not want to eat shrimp every day. you will get really sick of shrimp if you eat shrimp every single day. But a lot of Orthodox Christians will incorporate shellfish on any given fast day. They won't make a distinction, oil or not oil. My spiritual father says they're supposed to be on an oil day because you would be cooking the shrimp. You would be cooking, well, you could eat oysters.
I was going to say, why?
Raw oysters.
I was going there.
Yeah, raw oysters technically, I think, would be on the menu any given day. And what's funny is that we think of like lobster as an indulgence, but in the ancient world, they would have looked at eating crabs and lobster as garbage. Those are like scavengers at the bottom of the sea. You don't want to eat those, you know. So
because we think of them as a luxury, or I do. I love shellfish.
Yeah.
So should we still limit like how much we eat?
I mean, not technically. No, the fast does not require you to limit the amount of shellfish that you eat.
Okay.
That includes octopus as well. Although I have to tell you, I really love octopus if it's prepared well. I do not know how to prepare it well. I've tried, and it always ends up real rubbery. I've had it at Greek monasteries. Greek monasteries are genius at cooking for the fast. They've got all these cookies and pastries that are all Lenten and that are delicious, and you'd never know that you were fasting. They can prepare that octopus. It's so tender and tasty. Oh my goodness. But if you watch My Octopus Teacher on Netflix, you will probably be hard pressed. I don't know that I could eat an octopus again in my life after watching that documentary.
Make me cry.
Yeah.
I didn't think an octopus could make me cry.
And the funny thing is, I mean, I have seen, in my last parish, we used to slaughter a lamb on Holy Saturday. A little baby white lamb, and I would stand there and bless it, and one of my parishioners would slice its throat. And I have never thought, okay, I can never eat lamb again. Ever. I mean, I can pet the little lamb, and now I can eat a lamb. I watched that documentary and think, I'm not going to eat octopus. That just feels morally wrong to me after watching it. So technically, shellfish any day.
Okay.
Shellfish any day.
Got it.
But again, don't overdo it. Eat too many oysters, you're going to pay the price.
You're bound to hit a bad one.
Very quickly, a question about the calendar. Yes, so originally the Orthodox Church, the Church, when this was pre-schism, the Church adopted the Roman civil calendar, which was the Julian calendar. The Julian calendar is a lunar-based calendar that is different from our secular calendar today. They differ by about 13 days. There's a difference in those calendars by about 13 days. So that became the calendar. It didn't originate with the church. It didn't originate with Israel. It originated with the Roman Empire. Thus, the Julian calendar, as in Julius Caesar, right? And so that was the calendar that the church grew up with and devised all of its feasts and fasts and feast days and everything were on the Julian calendar. Along in the West comes the Gregorian calendar, and the Gregorian calendar was just specific to Western Europe. The Roman Catholic Church, I'm not sure what year they switched to the Gregorian calendar, but the Gregorian calendar is a solar-based calendar. It is more accurate, scientifically, it is more accurate than the Julian calendar. And again, the difference between those two calendars is 13 days. One of the things that happened in the 20th century is that the Greek church decided that they were trying to integrate with the rest of Europe and that they would adopt the calendar that the rest of Europe used, the Gregorian calendar. Now, this was a huge controversy. There were many who felt that they were betraying the Orthodox faith by adopting a new calendar. And there were old calendar movements from the very beginning of this starting when the Greek church adopted the Gregorian calendar. However, the old calendar movement in Greece sort of hit a fork in the road when the leaders of that movement decided that the Church of Greece, having adopted the Gregorian calendar, was no longer in the grace of God over the calendar issue. And that's when most said, whoa. Whoa. We wish we were old calendar. We wish we were Julian calendar, but this is not a communion-breaking event. This is really a question of which civil calendar do we use. Granted, that old calendar was sanctified by its use and presence in the Orthodox Church from the beginning, but it's not a communion-breaking thing. And so many of our modern-day saints that were old calendar by disposition rejected the old calendar movement because they did not believe that the Church of Greece was now devoid of grace because they accepted the Gregorian calendar. Much of the Orthodox world remains on the Julian calendar, and this is the distinction that you'll find. The difference is that for, in the West, Christmas is on December 25th. In Russia and Serbia and other countries like that, Christmas is on January 7th. That's that 13-day gap. And it affects pretty much all of the movable feasts, okay? All the feasts that fall on whatever day they happen to fall on say, if there's a feast on September 1st for us, which is Indiction, the beginning of the new year, according to the calendar, it'll be 13 days later on the Julian calendar. The difference, though, is that we did not change the way we calculate Pascha. So, while the Orthodox world will celebrate Christmas on 2 different days, in effect, because of this calendar issue, Pascha is celebrated on the same day everywhere because we still use the lunar Julian reckoning. That's why our Easter is different from Western Easter. They differ by a month this year, 4 weeks difference between Western Easter and Orthodox Easter. This is one of those things where we get to, like, the Orthodox Church never changes. It changes a little bit, but we're very discerning about change. We have to distinguish between change that breaks tradition and change that breaks communion, and change that is maybe regrettable but inevitable. And so the OCA adopted the Gregorian calendar, sometime in the 1970s, I believe. We are on, therefore, the new calendar, or the Gregorian calendar. That's why we celebrate Christmas on December 25th, not January 7th. The internet, which loves to amplify all debates, is a terrible place to read about the calendar issue, because you will be reading the people with the harshest, strictest, most outlandish views possible. Those will be the ones that get the most hits. Those will be the ones that will define the issue in your mind if you learn about it on the internet. So please, please be careful about that. It is not a good place to wade through controversy. I am happy to talk about controversial matters. By disposition, here's my position on the calendar. I feel that we should all be on the same calendar. If we all agree that that's the Julian, then we should be on the Julian. And I don't care about December 25th versus January 7th, because a lot of people, that's what it came down to, But if the whole Orthodox world decided Gregorian, great. I have no dog in that fight. I will accept the Gregorian, I will accept the Julian, if that's what we all accept to do together. But I still think that we should all be together. We should celebrate all the feasts together. That's my personal view. But for now, we have this, this distinction between those who are on the Julian calendar and those who are on the Gregorian. It doesn't break our communion with one another. I feel that it's regrettable, but it's, it is what it is. That's probably it. Yeah, there's a Mayan calendar. There's a lot of calendars. Yeah. And you can get into the calendar that the Jews used as well, which I'm not an expert on it, but it's interesting that the Church adopted the Roman civil calendar and didn't continue the calendar of Israel, its own religious calendar with its own terminology. Yes.
I have a practical question. I'm not even full disclaimer. So I'm in college, so I find myself in this situation more than I would like. So, you're in a study group, and you're like, oh, we're getting pizza, and they get pizza. And you're like, And sometimes you can just not eat anything, and that's fine. But sometimes it would specifically be rude if you did.
Yeah.
You would just eat the pizza in that case.
So you got a couple options there. One is, certainly, if they order some pepperoni and some just cheese, you just go for the cheese, right? You don't the pepperoni. If it has to be pepperoni, pick it off. And if they say, "What are you doing?" You say, "Oh, I have a little heartburn. I think this will." Just lie. I'm serious. It's a little heartburn. I just don't think I should eat the pepperoni today. In family settings, I have picked the cheese off, and I'll just eat the bread and the sauce. But you don't want to do that in a study group where that would be weird. You know, people would really be noticing what you were doing at that point. So yes, sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we really don't have a choice, and we just eat and don't call attention. Curia Frederica Matthews Green, how many of you have read any of Frederica Matthews Green's books, Facing East? So she was here today. She actually has a funny story, I think it's in Facing East, where she was out to lunch with some women and she orders French onion soup because it seemed like that was probably a fairly Lenten thing. And, you know, she was just thinking, boy, I really want the cheese on that too, so I just, you know, I'm not going to say anything. And the waiter actually asked her, "Would you like the cheese on that?" And she goes, "No." Yeah, please hold the cheese on my French onion soup. The cheese makes the soup. No one wants the onions in the broth. It's the cheese and the bread. The onions are a supplement, you know. So she had French onion soup without cheese. But you find yourselves in situations where you just have to, rather than call attention to it, you just have to eat. There's a sort of a general rule that certainly my spiritual father goes by. If you fail in the fast by actually eating meat on a fasting day, then he would recommend after the feast of picking up an extra fast day to make up for it. You wouldn't do that for dairy products, or even eggs or fish or wine or oil. You don't have to fast extra days to do that. And this is more of a spiritual discipline that comes from a spiritual father. This isn't in the canons. But if you fall, to fail in the fast is really to eat the meat. That's the big, that's where I went off the rails a little bit. And maybe I don't fast in the fast-free week after Pascha, but then afterwards I might fast on a Monday just to make up for the fact that I indulged myself or whatever. Any more questions? Any other questions about the calendar? I will, Samuel also asked me about the reading list. I will be doing a reading list for you guys real soon. I'll be working on that. All right, well, we've gone a long time today, so thank you all. Bless you. Have a good week. We will meet next week. I'll be back for Sunday morning for liturgy, and we'll be talking more about Great Lent and its structure next week.